My oldest daughter, Lucy, was born in Boston on March 2nd, 1957. She had a normal childhood. We spent the summers in our house in Marblehead Neck with all the facilities of the Eastern Yacht Club and the Pleon Yacht Club. Each summer or winter, we would charter a boat. Not all the sailing went smoothly. One day in early June, off of Bartlett's Reef, en route New London for the Harvard-Yale crew races, with a big sea running, Lucy, aged 7, crawled to the stern on our Manchester 17, past the helmsman, while I was in the cabin, and promptly fell overboard. Happily, Lucy was in her life jacket, and her mother fished her out of the ocean with a boat hook. However, turning into the sea with no engine was a scary moment. Lucy was a finisher in the famous hamburger race, where the Pleon Yacht Club races to McDonald's in Salem Harbor in their Optimist dinghies. Pictured here is the decisive sisters checker game in the 1968 Summer World Tournament. Riding with the Walter Andersons, Lucy learned to ride horseback, and once took a bad spill when she was hung upside down in the stirrup and the horse began to gallop. Unfortunately, those were the days before everyone wore helmets, but no long-term damage was done to Lucy, at least I don't think so. Now you can see why Lucy grew up to be such an accomplished person. She had to survive her childhood. Lucy was admitted to the third form at Miss Porter's School in Farmington and graduated in 1975 with good marks and good SAT scores. However, Lucy was somewhat discouraged with Miss Porter's School because she felt they did not have enough advanced classes in her favorite subject, physics. We made 2 trips to the Caribbean in those years, and in 1972, my 16-year-old daughter, whilst having dinner with the family in a pub anchored off Mosquito Island in Virgin Gorda Sound, caught the eye of a young man, part of a family, at a nearby table. That family had chartered a famous racing yacht, and after dinner, the father approached me to ask if Lucy could join their party and visit their yacht. Well, the father having gone to Harvard, so I thought it was probably okay. Darkness comes quickly in the tropics, and by midnight it was pitch black, overcast, and no moon. Where was Lucy? Karen and I moved out of our bunks to the cockpit to wait and listen. At 0100, I began to row around the anchorage, but I couldn't find the famous chartered racing yacht. At 0230, as I was making ready to launch parachute flares, Lucy was delivered back on board. I was so angry that I confined her to her cabin for the entire next day. No sunbathing, no swimming. After all, how long does it take to tour a yacht? Well, perhaps there were competing interests. Lucy was admitted to the University of Pennsylvania, determined to major in architecture, but later changed her field of concentration to fine arts. Drawing new skyscrapers was hard, said Lucy. In preparation for college, Lucy bought lumber and made her own bed. I felt badly for Lucy. Maybe I thought I should have bought the bed. We drove Lucy and baggage and the bed to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. That year was the first of the new sexual freedom experiments in college, where, if elected, girls' and boys' rooms were mixed in the dorm, sharing common bathrooms. It was a far cry from my college days, when you had to hoodwink both the campus cops and the corridor proctor in order to get a girl into your room. Life in the Penn dorms was not so bad. In Lucy's sophomore year, she decided to give a big party at our house in Avon, Connecticut. To my surprise, about 50 classmates made the journey to Connecticut, and we had a big, sit-down, formal, catered dinner party. However, The debutante at the end of the evening needed a little resuscitation.
Thank heaven for little girls.
Lucy took a year at the Sorbonne in Paris, living with a family as part of a junior year abroad program. Her French was good to start with and improved hugely over the year. During the summer, she worked as a teller in my roommate's retail banking company, Credit Sauvage. Lucy recounts a story that during the lunch hour, all of the local employees would take off for a classic French lunch, and all of the clients would come to her window at the bank. She would also have to answer the phone. Despite all of this activity, she overheard a couple in the back of the room saying, "You know, that American girl's French is not too bad." Lucy's summer was made. At the graduation ceremonies from the University of Pennsylvania, we found mature, elegant students who, to my great surprise, gave their families a cocktail party. Lucy took an MBA from UConn and apprenticed at several banks. After a few years, she moved to Manhattan and lived in a lovely apartment on East 73rd Street. Lucy married Steve Patricola, a fellow Penn student, on January 25, 1992. The wedding was held in the chapel at St. Thomas Cathedral on Fifth Avenue, New York, and a reception was held at the Colony Club with a large bridal party. Lucy wore her mother's wedding gown and lace shawl, which had been passed down for generations. At the wedding, there was a rowdy group of young men that constituted the Commotion Crew. After the Colony Club closed, we moved a few blocks south to the Drake Bar. And after the Drake Bar closed, we ended up at a nightclub, Labatt Bar, west of Broadway. When we left the nightclub in the morning, it was snowing, and we made fresh tracks in the usually busy street. I thought it was a great omen for the marriage. Lucy and Steve started the traditional wedding dance, followed by Lucy and me, and they escaped the Colony Club in a cloud of rose petals. They went on to Canal Bay in the Caribbean for their honeymoon. Before Lucy married, she had contracted breast cancer, which is now in remission. Subsequently, a different cancer was found and also had to be removed. Lucy is fine now, but it seems safer to adopt children rather than to give birth. Lucy and Steve have two boys, Tommy, born on August 20th, 1996, and Robbie, born on November 3rd, 2000. Steve and Lucy lived in New York City for several years, while Lucy worked as an analyst at Standard & Poor's, the credit rating agency, and Steve was a sell-side securities analyst at Credit Suisse. Steve's great analytical ability made him the favorite for the Credit Suisse investment bankers. He played a major role in explaining complicated new security offerings to prospective buyers. Subsequently, they moved to a large, lovely house close to the water in Rye, New York. That home has many happy memories of Christmases and parties. At one party, I arrived ready to return to Europe to pick up Commotion, and I was dressed in sailing gear. My sons, John and Godfrey, were more elegantly dressed. In a sense, our roles had reversed. Lucy is an accomplished cook, manager of a huge house, and gets down to brass tacks with her kids, skiing double diamonds, driving them around in powerboats. At this point, I want to introduce Steve Patricola, who relates a piece of unimaginable history, the terrorist attack of September 11th, 2001. Steve's office was in One Liberty Plaza, across the street from the Twin Towers, and Steve was accordingly very close to ground zero.
Hello, my name is Steve Patricola. I'm a relatively new member of the Baker family tree, having married Frank Baker's daughter, Lucy, in 1992. My story is about the demise of the Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan, better known as the World Trade Center. I first visited the nearly completed Twin Towers during my senior year in high school as part of an economics field trip, circa 1974-1975. The towers were developed by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey as a means of revitalizing commerce in downtown New York City. Opening in a dismal economy, they actually took a many number of years to fill up, but ultimately became the home to many prominent financial institutions and business enterprises. Soaring some 110 stories, they displaced the Empire State Building as the world's tallest edifices. In my view, the towers were an architectural masterpiece, though they certainly had their critics. The panoramic views afforded from the upper stories were nothing less than spectacular. To me, the Twin Towers symbolized the might of American industry while underscoring New York City's position as the then finance capital of the world. Through time, they became an inexorable part of the New York City skyline. Before and after business school, I lived for a number of years across the street from the Twin Towers in a pioneering residential development known as Battery Park City. During this time, I passed through the towers virtually every day to board the underground subways that converge there while heading to work, to go shopping, or meet up with friends. I ran a myriad of errands in the towers' many shops and banks. They became an everyday part of my life, which makes their destruction on 9/11/01 all the more unfathomable to comprehend. The night before that fateful day, I actually had a miserable head cold, had trouble resting, and doubted I would even bother to report to work. Long in the view, if I could get out of bed, I wasn't sick enough to stay home, so I trekked in nevertheless. Ironically, I planned to stop in a drugstore across the street from my office at 1 Liberty Plaza, in the lobby of the Twin Towers, to pick up some cold medicine and tissues around the time of my lunch break. As fate allowed, I would never make it there. The workday began quietly enough. My office was a virtual bunker in the core of the building, bereft of any windows and nearly soundproof. At the apparent time the first tower was struck by a hijacked airliner, a little after 8 a.m. that day, I heard nothing. Though remember that the lights in my office and my computer screen momentarily flickered. I shrugged that off to a power surge and went about my business. Minutes later, a very startled coworker came running into my office with a horrified look on his face and said, "Steve, get the hell out of here. There was some sort of explosion across the street." I immediately got up, took nothing with me, and followed him to the stairwell, where we walked down the many flights of stairs to the lobby. That co-worker who remembered to look for me may very well have saved my life. Once outside, I still had no idea what had happened. We were told by building personnel to hang around outside the lobby. By then, we figured out that the tower was on fire, but had no idea why. I thought maybe a small turboprop plane had lost its engines and crashed into the building. Over the years, this had happened before in New York City to other skyscrapers. While bad enough, the mood changed when I heard people screaming that people were jumping out of the tower. Near pandemonium ensued around our building, and I decided to get away and head east. By then it dawned on me that something terrible had happened. I walked several blocks and stopped near the New York Federal Reserve Bank building, where I caught up with several colleagues from the office. We milled around there for a while. I remember the sky got dark. This was apparently when the attack on the second tower occurred by the second hijacked airliner. I did not see the airliner, but heard a loud noise from the crash into the building. Still unsure of what was going on, I decided we needed to evacuate Lower Manhattan and urged my colleagues to follow me uptown. Some opted to remain there, but several did follow. Fortunately, It was a pleasant day for what would become a 4-mile walk with a bad head cold. By the time we reached the Brooklyn Bridge, streams of fire engines and other emergency response vehicles were making their way downtown toward the towers, now the site of the first unprovoked attack on American soil since the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. I remember the anguish and horror on the faces of these brave firemen and police officers when they gazed up at the towering infernos. They had answered the call to duty, but perhaps for some of them their fates had been sealed. This I will never know for sure, but many of their colleagues would perish that fateful day trying to save others trapped in the towers. It was a ghastly and surreal scene, one I will never forget. The exodus from Lower Manhattan was surprisingly orderly. Thousands of people stranded downtown, headed east through Chinatown and then to the Bowery, walking uptown through the Lower East Side. I was probably about a mile north when the first tower collapsed. All I remember seeing was a huge cloud of smoke where the tower previously stood, though I was too far away to hear anything. We were getting second and third-hand information from people communicating with others by cell phone. By then we had figured out what would happen. Well, sort of. Wild rumors began circulating. For example, that the White House had been hit, that the Capitol had been hit, etc. We really had no idea what was going on, but surmised that we were now at war. I don't think it was clear that these were targeted terrorist attacks. A colleague lent me his cell phone and I tried to call home, but could not get through. All we could do was keep walking uptown. Eventually we learned that both towers had collapsed and thousands of people had perished. Ground Zero had become a part of the American lexicon. As we headed into Midtown, I began to see fighter planes hovering above in the sky. Instinctively, I decided to stay east and keep away from tall landmark buildings such as the Empire State Building. I was afraid of subsequent attacks. Apparently my fears were also shared by the authorities. Eventually, we made it to Grand Central Station, which was locked down. I believe it was around 12:30 p.m. by then. I decided to head over to the Penn Club and wait for Grand Central Station to reopen. Several colleagues followed me there. We made phone calls home from the payphone in the lobby, had lunch downstairs in the grill, used the restrooms, and watched the events unfold on CNN. At least now it was clear what had happened. Around 2:30 p.m., I decided to head over to Grand Central, which was reopening, and said farewell to my colleagues. I caught the first jam-packed train north and finally returned home by around 4 p.m. I had survived 9/11/01. Over the next few days, what was not clear was whether or not One Liberty Plaza had survived the collapse of the Twin Towers. Press reports wildly conflicted on the matter, and one erroneous report noted that the building had indeed imploded. Hearing this, I went about reorganizing my life, buying a new briefcase, office supplies, and cell phone. The building, while pretty badly damaged, did not collapse and was ultimately found to be structurally sound. However, it would be many months before I would work there again. For several weeks I worked from home and eventually moved to temporary offices in a law firm on the west side of Manhattan. It took the better part of 2 years to remove the debris from the collapsed towers, though the scar lingers to this day. A number of surrounding buildings ultimately collapsed as well or were deemed unsafe to reoccupy and were razed. The downtown skyline had been changed forever. To this day, it remains unclear how the redevelopment of Lower Manhattan will proceed. We remain at war with the fundamentalist zealots and cowards who had the temerity to terrorize us. Our way of life has been challenged, and our freedoms have been compromised. Things will never be the same.
Thanks, Steve. You've given us a first-hand account that will interest viewers of this family history forever. Lucy and Steve subsequently moved to an even larger house in Purchase, New York, 129 Glen Park Road, where she maintains a great collection of family portraits. We've kept the family close together. Lucy and Steve occasionally bring their family to our house in Florida, where I've taken Tommy fishing in our Aquasport 17. As the kids get older, we ran early together in the morning, a ritual 2 miles. We've skied with the Patricolas in Vail over several winter vacations. Tommy is a real shush boomer and jumper, and he's now changed to snowboarding. I think he needed a bit of consoling from his mother as the gondola took off, however. One year, with the Peter Godfreys, we chartered a J-44 to race the New York Yacht Club cruise, and Tommy had a stint on the helm. Tommy and I have paddled the Housatonic twice. It's about 20 miles downriver. Last time, we capsized, but only after Tommy had his lunch. Younger brother Robbie is a wonderful mix of being the sweetest and the fiercest. He will charge headlong into anything with the possibility of destroying it and himself, but you know he has a love for everything. Last summer, Robbie came to our house to spend a few days. We went camping, played miniature golf, and worked on the archery range. His mother asked me to do some homework with him, and after a lot of complaining, Robbie aced the material. One way to encourage youngsters to become students is to invite them to college football games. What Harvard-Yale lacks in professionalism, it makes up for in tradition and enthusiasm for the historic rivalry. Sometimes Easter came too early and we were still in Vero Beach. But when Easter is in April, we tried to organize an egg roll at 8 Bells. Competition was fierce. For the adults, we had a golden egg loaded with jewels, value of about $50. And it was hidden according to a series of arcane clues. On one Easter egg roll, Lucy and Kristen solved the clues simultaneously in about 2 minutes, and both took off running to the exact hiding place, our mailbox down on the street. We had to call that Easter egg hunt a draw. I'm proud of my oldest daughter and admire her life. She's composed and thoughtful, a great and a warm mother, and is a very solid family administrator. As grandparents, we've tried hard to expose the young Patricolas to a world of sports, colleges, military history, and overall, our way of life. The parents have done the same. Consequently, there is a lot on the plate of the boys. The newest entry to the Patricola family is Rocket, a 12-pound black pug who is a ton of fun and double trouble.
Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see.
As I write this family history, the grandchildren, who are the newest generation, will take positions of prominence and will be the leaders in the mid-21st century. Today, the objective is to cram as much as possible into these young minds and to insist on solid mastery of schooling. Tomorrow's leaders are at stake.
Nothing but blue skies from now on.